Hey everyone, welcome to a new video, welcome to my channel. My name is Micah. Today I'm going to be talking to you about 10 eyeshadow palettes that pleasantly surprised me. So these were palettes where I went in with very low expectations and then I tried them and then I ended up liking them a lot better than a lot of people on YouTube seem to do, or I had such low expectations because I had tried other products by the brand, and so when I tried something differently by that brand, I was blown away with the quality. So that's what we're going to be doing in this video. I've got 10 palettes here, so let's get started. Let's just start with at the front here, and that's definitely one that falls into that latter category of I had tried something by this brand that I wasn't a fan of, but then I tried something differently and I fell in love, and that would be the BH Cosmetics Love in London palette. This is the sleeve. This is what the outer packaging actually looks like. And this palette is a more cool toned, well, neutral, I would say, the color story. You get a couple of true cool tones in here, but there's a couple of more neutrally warm leaning kind of shades. It doesn't get super duper warm though. So if you are someone who is more fair skinned, and if you want to have a good palette that's more like true neutral, more cool tone leaning, then this is definitely an affordable one that I really liked. And the reason why this one surprised me so much is not because I doubted BH's quality, by no means. I had tried just one palette before I tried this by BH Cosmetics, and that was the Royal Affair palette. And that was the first BH Cosmetics palette that came out that made me go like, wow, I want to try this palette. And I had never had that before. So I picked that one up and I was just a bit disappointed. And I was mainly disappointed in the color story of that palette, not the quality. There was only like one or two unique shades. I felt like everything in that palette was something that I already had a million times over. So to me, that palette wasn't the best. But then I tried this one and I was like, now I get it. Now I get everyone's obsession with BH Cosmetics, because this is not only affordable and lovely quality, but I hope you can see quite well what I mean here. You get a couple of more unique shades with these like blues and purples and this like really nice sort of like charcoal gray kind of shade. It's got a really good cool toned dark brown, and then you get a really nice couple of crease shades here and a lot of mid-tone shimmers to really round off a look. You can make it pull a bit more warm toned, but it's definitely more cool toned leaning, and I love that there aren't enough cool tones on the market, I have to say. So that's why BH, not only did you impress me with the quality this time, but also with your color story. So let's stick to affordable palettes for a minute, and number 2 would be the e.l.f. Earth and Ocean palette. And the reason why this palette surprised me is because I had tried, again, like the BH, I had tried other shadows by e.l.f. before. Their little matte for matte, like 10-pan palette, I tried that in the past, and I wasn't blown away by it. I thought it was okay, but over here, e.l.f. is a little bit more expensive usually, at least it used to be, compared to the US. Now they just seem to turn the dollar sign into a euro sign, so that's a little bit better. But I believe that those already retailed for like 15 euros from the European website back when that was the only way we could get e.l.f. So for me, they were a bit expensive for what they gave me. I definitely felt that the US was getting a better deal there and coming from a different perspective than I was. But then I tried the Earth and Ocean earlier this year, and woo, if you're looking for an affordable blue-green palette, this is it. This is amazing. You get a couple of neutrals in here. It is definitely a little bit more like cool tone leaning, but then these greens give a bit of warmth, especially with that yellow tone gold here. My favorite shade in this palette is Underwater here, and also this Silver Cold Tundra is amazing. This has great quality. It's an affordable price point. You get 18 shades, and this is such a nice, well-rounded palette if you're looking to, for instance, expand a little bit. If you're very used to wearing neutrals, but you want to add a pop of color, then I think this palette has the price point to try a little bit something more creative. And all of these shades are not that far off of neutrals. Like, these greens have quite a lot of brown in them, so they're not that sort of far from being neutral. And also some of these darker blues, they are quite easy to put into a look, even if you, for instance, put that bright blue on the lower lash line for just that bright pop of something different. I think that this is a palette that can appeal to a lot of people, so e.l.f. did a really good job with this one. Let's talk about the palette that didn't get a lot of hype because a lot of people hated this palette, and it ended up being one of my favorites. The ABH Subculture palette. This was, of course, kicked to the ground by almost everybody in the makeup world when this came out, mainly because this was marketed as being the sister palette of the Modern Renaissance, and a lot of people felt that because this formula was so different, it just didn't live up to the hype. This is definitely more of like a pressed pigment kind of palette, and I have to say that I did pick this up quite a bit later. In fact, I think I've only owned this for just over a year, so I haven't had it for very long. I definitely didn't buy it upon release, but because the color story appealed to me so much, because I've got brown eyes, and then these kind of like murky mustards and greens and burgundies and this teal especially, they just work really well if you have brown eyes. This is a brown-eyed lover's like dream. If you want to accentuate your brown eyes, this is the color story to play around with, which is why I wanted to try it. So when the Anastasia palettes went on sale, I think for Black Friday, not this year, but the year before, so 2018, that's when I picked this up. And of course the formula has changed between the original release and probably the time I got it. So this is probably not the very sort of powdery formula that this palette originally used to have, and I did get it on a deal, but this is my favorite Anastasia palette to date. Especially in the fall time, I love reaching for this, and these shades, because there aren't that many shimmers in this palette, but these shades pair so perfectly with a lot of those like indie single multi-chromes. That's what I was doing. Like last December, November, like all I was wearing was this palette and then a multi-chrome, using some of the mattes in the crease and then a multi-chrome all over the lid, and it was amazing. So I understand why people don't like this. I think if I had the original release, maybe I didn't like it as much as I do now. It is definitely a palette that needs a bit of loving. It's not one where you can just like slap it on and you're out the door, especially that teal that I like so much. That's probably the hardest one to work with, but because I love teal, I'm willing to try and make it work. So ABH was definitely one that surprised me because so many people dragged this thing through the mud, and then I got it and I was like, it's my favorite. Another much sort of, well, hated on, I wouldn't say hated on, but especially the version that came out before this one, a lot of people didn't like, and I'm talking about the Too Faced White Chocolate Bar. This was limited edition, I think for Christmas 2017, if I'm mistaken. I'm not entirely sure, but I think a year before it, they came out with two of these little minis, and they had like a milk chocolate mini and a white chocolate chip mini or something like that. And a lot of the shades from that mini are actually in this larger palette. And a lot of people didn't like that mini palette, which is why I think also this one didn't do very well. Ladies and gentlemen, unless you have my very pale skin tone, this is not for you. This, however, is a fair girl's dream of an eyeshadow palette. So I just want to also point out that if people sometimes don't like something, it's because the product isn't right for them. And I find that very often people just say, I don't like this, but they don't really consider whether that palette was made for them. Case in point, what's actually on my eyes today is the Jackie Aina palette by ABH. And I very sort of was like, it's great that it's out there, but it's not really targeted, like meant for me with my very fair skin. So I very much held off of buying it. But then I saw so many people with fair skin tones using it in videos, and I was like, I think I can make it work. So that's sort of like, I'm testing it out right now. I've used the purples and the berries today, and where it, like everything is going to look dark and sultry in that palette on me. And sometimes I like that look. But if I want to go for something super basic and neutral with a pop of pastel, like this, like for me, also for instance, the Too Faced Sweet Peach palette is one that I don't really use a lot because I don't like some of the peach tones that are in there because they're a bit dark on me. But this has peach tones that do work on me. You get some cool tone neutrals in here. I love these two cool tone shimmer and also this one over here. Like these are the kind of tones that just work really well on my neutral to cool toned skin with a very, of course, fair like spectrum to it. Like I'm like pasty. Like I've caught sun, ladies and gentlemen. This is probably about as tan that I've been in the past 5 years. If you are pasty pale, this is quite possibly one of the best palettes on the market. It didn't get a lot of hype. A lot of people hated on this because it just wasn't for them. But that's why I ended up loving this. When I swatched this in store, I was like, oh, I need this. So let's talk a minute about something that surprised me because nobody talked about it. And that would be the LA Splash Classic Horror Eyeshadow Palette. I don't know why no more people are mentioning this palette. This is a grungy rainbow, and what's best about this? Can you see that packaging? It's so stunning. It's got all these like zombie steampunky kind of ladies on it. It seems to have like a vampire and like just, you know, awesome design, which is why I sort of wanted to own it when I spotted it on the website. But then I tried looking to see how long it was out and all that, and I couldn't find anything. I think there were 2 reviews on YouTube, and they were not very well done reviews anyway. So I was like, this is one of those palettes that just nobody's talking about. So I bought it because it wasn't horribly expensive. So I was like, I might as well just try it to see. And this is now one of my favorite rainbow eyeshadow palettes. Not because it's like a true rainbow, but because this is a grungy rainbow. Because all of these shades pull a little bit darker on your skin than you might expect from looking at it in the pan. Plus it has this really nice bright blue periwinkle shade called Blue Moon. Oh, it's gorgeous shade. I do have to say that the black in here isn't the best, and these were a little bit powdery. This is very similar quality to Sample Beauty I found. I bought both of those palettes at the same time. And both of these, like, these worked really well on me. They are a little bit stiff and more difficult to work with, but for the price point and the color range that it has, and then combined with that stunning packaging, I'm like, why are no more people talking about this? Why don't I see this in more eyeshadow palette collections? Because I love this. I really liked it. And let's just talk about unpopular opinions again, and that would be the Urban Decay Backtalk palette. This was a palette that so many people didn't like, and I get their critiques. I definitely get it, but I kind of bought this because A, it's Urban Decay, which is one of my favorite brands for eyeshadow. It's got mauves. It's centered around the Backtalk shade, which is one of their best-selling lipstick shades. And I really liked it, and I thought that this could be a nice sort of addition to Naked 3. And what this palette has, it has this mirror in the middle that will only go back in, and everything will only stick together if you line up the magnets just right. So that's, again, I'm going to put the mirror away because that's going to drive us crazy. But if you don't put it in the correct way, this palette will no longer shut. So that was something that a lot of people didn't like because they found it too fiddly. But if you just, you know, take it out and put it back in the way it came out, there is no issue there. So for me, that wasn't really an issue. But a lot of people didn't like the packaging. I like how this sort of like opens up like a little artiste kind of palette. You get shadows on one side, face products on the other. And what for me made this palette and made it work better than a lot of people is because I ended pulling in the face products as eyeshadow. And that instantly gives you 2 more mattes and 2 more shimmers. So a lot of people were critiquing this because there wasn't a lot of like, not really like a matte to sort of go with these lighter shades, and everything got quite dark, and that, you know, you got quite a lot of shimmer in here, but it didn't really have a champagne. But you have that face highlight here. And you have these 2 blushes, especially Double Take, I found was like better on me as a transition for this entire palette than anything else that's going on in here. So because I use it like that, I ended up liking this so much more than so many other people. I do have to be very honest though, that I haven't reached for this a whole lot since I got it, but I have to say that I still really like this. And if you just, you know, pay a bit of attention and try to be more creative with the product, then I think you can still make things work. And the same goes for the Morphe Jaclyn Hill Vault. I have the entire collection. The reason why I got the entire collection is because I was interested in 3 out of the 4 palettes, and getting all 4 was just as expensive as buying 3. I would not have bought Ring the Alarm because that's the warm toned one. Does this palette have, like, do these palettes have their flaws? Yes. I never tried the original Jaclyn Hill palette because to me it was too big. And that's what I like about these little palettes, because rather than one large palette, I wish Morphe would do this more often, each palette has its own, like, individual color story. But each palette has its own individual color story. And so we have warm tones, we have purples, we have warm tones that lean more like Melt, Gemini, Mustards, Greens kind of thing. And then we get a cool tone palette with sort of like smoky eyes, teals, forest greens, and some taupes, which this one is my favorite. I can already tell you. Especially this one completely blew me away. If you are looking into a Morphe palette, you don't want to buy one of their really big ones and you want a color story that's a bit more unique than anything else that's on the market, this is the one. And that's why I ended up liking mine so much, because I feel that, especially from Morphe as a brand, they seem to redo like the same color stories over and over, and you get tons of duplicate shades. These don't do that. So the Dark Magic would be my favorite. Then quality-wise, I would say the Bling Boss palette would be my favorite with the purples. Especially, was it Ballsy is really, really pretty. And I also really like that Berry Treasure shade, which is like a very black and purple, but with blue. And also that Royal Purple was quite easy to work with. And then the ones that I don't reach for a lot, like warm tones, Morphe can do warm tones like no other. So this palette gave me no issues. It is a bit more red toned leaning, so it still works on me quite well. Especially Balm is quite a unique shade in my collection, but I don't really reach for that because it's just a bit warm. The palette that a lot of people were lusting after, it seems, and the one that a lot of people critiqued a lot, was the Armed and Gorgeous, which is the one with all the mustards. And there's definitely this shade Top Secret is not really good. I have to say that that's the worst shade in all four of these palettes. So what for me was the issue was with a lot of people who were reviewing this was that there's 40 shades in these palettes altogether, and a lot of people were critiquing the entire shadow collection that you get based on trying maybe 2 or 3 shades. I tried every single shade that's in here, and I have to say that I was very impressed with the quality, especially considering how much backlash these shadows got for it not being the same formula as the Jaclyn Hill palette. Like I said, I don't own that, so I can't compare. These are the only Morphe shadows I have, and because I have warm tone purples, different kinds of warm tones that actually work better on my complexion, and a good cool tone palette, I really rate this quite highly. And I would recommend this if you are looking to try Morphe, to just pick one of the color stories that appeals to you the most, because that way you get to try Morphe formula. And to be quite honest, apart from that green shade, I had no issues with any of the shades that are going on in this little selection here. So yeah, different opinion. I know. I tend to have that a lot, it seems. Then a palette that I wanted to show in here, because I heard some people that this palette was a bit hit and miss, and that is the September Rose Slush palette, the original one, so #1. And the Slush palette is 25 colorful shades. It is sort of like a brighter take on a rainbow, you could say. And one thing that I like about brights is if there's also a couple of good shimmers. And there are definitely a few shades in these palettes that are a bit, I'm like, they don't all have the same consistent performance, I have to say that. But the looks I was able to create with this were absolutely stunning, because these palettes, like these shadows, blended themselves. So from what I had heard about it, I wasn't entirely sure what I could expect. And I was like, you know, very much into trying colors and trying more indie brands last year. So I was like, I'm just gonna give it a whirl. And then I wore it over the summertime. And if you want the perfect palette for sunset eyes, this is it. This is it. Those purples and those oranges and those pinky berry shades together, it's so stunning. So for me, this is definitely a palette that I look forward to using a lot more, because it's just so good. It's just so good, so good. So this palette is definitely one that I rate very, very highly, and it was a bit unexpected for me. So that's why it was a surprise, because I had heard such mixed reviews. Palette number 9 that surprised me, the Marais palette by Melt. I, before trying this, had only tried Melt Stacks so far. I had never tried one of their palettes. I didn't own the Gemini. I didn't own the Smoke Sessions. I had swatched the Radioactive in store and I was a bit like, not sure. But then they released this. And this color story had my name written all over it because it's got those greens, it's got teals, and then it's got navies. I wasn't too sure about these like reds over here, but these like darker tones I did quite like. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna bite the bullet. I'm gonna try it and I'm going to see. And because I tried this, I got myself the Gemini and I got myself the Smoke Sessions. And I'm very, very much contemplating getting their 420 palette as well as the Vita. Like, not because I just want to complete the skull, but those bright greens that are in the Vita with those yellow, I think it's got yellows as well. And then it's got a couple of like cool tone neutrals. I think that that will be stunning. And I just really, really fell in love with the packaging of this, the design, the quality of the shadows, which is, they just aced it with this. So because this was so hyped up and because Melt as a brand has been so hyped up, I was never really sure what to expect. And I was very, very happy that when I tried one of their very hyped up palettes, that it just worked lovely. And last but not least, I want to show you this shiny number, the Natasha Danone Gold palette. This was a palette that, again, I had tried the Lila before this. So I was, you know, that I thought wasn't worth $129, 113 euros. That's what this goes for over here. And I just wasn't sure. But then again, I saw people playing with this. I saw people playing, you know, doing looks with it. And I was like, you know, that's a really nice, like stunning palette that I think I can get a lot of use out of. So I definitely put this on my wish list. And when I went to Paris last year, I went to Sephora, spotted this palette, gave it a swatch, and I was like, I need this in my life. And when I started using this on my eyes, I now understand, ooh, that's bright. I now understand why Natasha Danone is worth, or can be worth, 113 euros. Because this, to me, was definitely worth it. Definitely worth it. I love about this palette, you know what I love so much about it? Is texture. This palette gives you, look, it, to me, when I first looked at this, I was like, it's just boring neutrals. What do I need with it? And of course, you look at these shades and you go like, great. But actually, my favorite shade is this bronzy, boring brown, close to champagne shade. Why? Because it's the transformer of the palette. And what I appreciate about these like boring browns is that you can do a boring brown look. But the minute you put some of these like shimmers in the middle with those greens and teals, it's like they change color. And I'm like, this is the chameleon of eyeshadow palettes. Every single time I've done a look with this, it turns out differently. Depending on how you pair the shades and how you blend them all together and how you layer them, if you're looking for a true neutral palette with great versatility and just a hint of color, get yourself this one. Because I know it's expensive, save up for it or wait for a sale if you don't have the money for it, but this is one of my most highly rated palettes in my collection at the moment. So there you have it, 10 eyeshadow palettes that surprised me for several reasons, either because I didn't hear anybody about it, talking about it, or because there was a lot of negativity about them, or because I had had not great experience with other products from the brand in the past. Just a myriad of reasons why things, you know, may go differently than you had expected. So I hope that this video was enjoyable to watch. Please give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more by me. I make 3 new videos a week on this channel, so stay tuned for the next one. Stay safe and stay healthy in the meantime. Bye!